What better way to compare old versus new than with movie remakes? Now I'm doing this episode solo because Reagan's a little too young for the scary movie I picked, the classic Stephen King's It. This is a non-spoiler comparison for the 1990 version starring Tim Curry versus the 2017 version starring Bill Skarsgård. Ugh, clowns. Before I discuss the differences in quality between these two adaptations, I'm going to talk about the one thing that really separates them, and that's how they deal with the books. While Stephen King writes with a formula that involves flashbacks, whereas the adults in the story remember things that happened to them as kids, and it's all intertwined. The 1990 version follows this exactly as the book does. 2017, it doesn't. It actually chops up the little pieces so that the flashbacks are one story and what happens to them as adults are another. This entire film is actually what happens to the kids in the 80s, meaning we're probably going to get another film that deals with the adults. Hopefully they do a really good job on that one. Now I'm going to address whether or not each of these versions was faithful to the original book. The 1990 miniseries did a pretty good job of this. It stuck to the points, and really the only things it kept out were things that weren't really able to put on television in prime time. Especially considering that this was done in 1990, standards were a lot more constrictive than they are now. As far as the 2017 movie, it veered away on a couple issues, and there were things that really bugged me. Let's deal with the main one that just I couldn't get over. In the books and in the miniseries, there is a swamp-like area, and this is how they enter into the sewers to do the final battle with It. And they even reference this in the 2017 movie. They go down to that area. But for some reason, instead of using that entrance to the sewer that they were in, they find a haunted house. They use that to go into the same sewers. And what's worse is the haunted house looks just like the one from the Addams Family. I'm not kidding. I mean, come on. If you're going to go with the cliche, give me something better than a haunted house. When I talk about constraints on the original miniseries, I'm talking about two areas: time and funding. ABC wasn't throwing around a lot of money for this thing, and it shows. There was only one CGI scene in the entire miniseries. It was a shower scene, and it looks really cheap. When it comes down to the final monster, and again, not spoiling anything, they used a puppet with people moving its arms and legs around. It just wasn't very pretty. Now, in the time issue, it was originally supposed to be four 4-hour episodes, and they cut it down to two 2-hour episodes. You also have to factor in the constraints of commercials. They had to set these scenes exact same points every time so that it would fit in with commercials. This is something that the 2017 film didn't have to worry about. As a matter of fact, the editing is excellent in it, and they did take full advantage of their R rating. The violence, the adult themes, the gore, and the language, full in effect, and it's actually pretty cool. So how do these two versions compare? I'm going to break them down completely separate. The 1990s miniseries was an excellent adaptation of the story and had great acting. I didn't really like it back when I saw it the first time, but after a few years it's starting to grow on me, and I think it's a very good presentation. On a side note, I think it's also a great starter film if younger viewers are trying to get into the horror genre. It's not going to scare them completely and give them nightmares, but there's a couple good frights in there that it's going to work. I think I'm going to start using the label horror film with training wheels. Now, the 2017 version of it had a couple of very scary moments. Mostly the clown, but some of the bullies, and even some of the parents. It really gets to you at points in time, and that's great. I also started to get a vested feel for the characters. I really felt like I started to care about what was going to happen to them, even more so than in the 1990 miniseries. I do think, however, that if I hadn't read the books, I might have liked this film even a little bit more. So I'm going to give it a thumbs up, and, well, just kidding. Nobody ever wants to see anybody do that. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Go see this movie in the theater at night. They're still scary.